What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today we're going to do something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I get asked this question a lot, and that question is, which folding knife should I buy? That's a very, very complicated question to answer. So what I've done here, and I've got some bullet points next to me. I know I normally do things unscripted, but there's a lot of information I need to go over, and I do not want to go over anything incorrectly. I want to make sure I get my message across correctly and actually hopefully help somebody make the purchase that they want to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over different price ranges that I've come up with myself, and then examples of good knives for that price range, and what to expect from the price range if you want to buy something that's not one of my personal recommendations, which is totally fine. As you go up in price, of course, things get more complicated. Opinions vary greatly, and a lot of arguments start. So I'm going to try and go over that and try and make things as simple as possible. Though there is a lot of information, so this is going to be a pretty long video. Also, if you're one of those people who will be bothered by me trying to justify a knife that costs more than $50, or in this case, we're going to talk about knives all the way up to about $500, then this video is not for you. It's totally okay to move along to the next thing on YouTube and not watch this video at all. So to each their own. Your opinion is your own, and that's completely fine with me. You do not have to agree with me. We're going to start off. Oh, by the way, all these knives that I'm going to show here today have already been shown on the channel. So if you've been watching, you're going to recognize these. But we're going to start off with the sub $10 category. The knife here in front of you is the Ozark Trail Knives Flipper Knife. And this category is one that I would call crap, basically. If you've got less than $10 to spend, maybe save up and go to the next category. This knife I'm showing because, you know, if you're really, really interested in this category, this is about a $5 knife, and it's probably the best thing that exists that I've ever seen. But let me be clear about this. I still don't like it. I've got a video on it explaining why I don't like it. So that's pretty much it. Anything else? Well, other things I'm going to put in this category are any knife that you would find at a gas station, regardless of what they're charging for it, or any fantasy-based knives. So if it's got dragons all over it or the Batman logo, probably steer away from it. So that's going to be it for there. We're going to just move these out of the way one by one. The next category I'm going to get into is what I'm going to refer to as the beater category. And there are a lot of knives in here in this range that I like. This is where I prefer people get into if they're really, really on a budget. $10 to $30. You're looking at China or Taiwan build. In this case, we're looking at probably my favorite inexpensive beater knife by, no surprise, Kershaw. They make some really great beaters. This is the 1338 WM that I showed the other day. It is part of a 2-pack that you used to be able to get at Walmart, assisted folding knife. And this would be my recommendation if you can find this online. They run about $12 to $15 on the secondary market. These are all going to be entry-level steels. You're probably going to see a lot of steel frames with plastic or low-grade aluminum, which is exactly what this is. But that's what you want to aim for. You want to aim for something that's going to have good ergonomics with a basic functional blade shape. In this case, a drop point blade is excellent. That's a very good utilitarian blade shape. Stay away from those. Oh, they look like talons. I don't know. They're, I don't know what they're called. I think it begins with a K. Anyways, stay away from the gimmicky stuff like that. You're going to have, blade plays to be expected. In this case, this one actually does not have blade play. And also, blade centering is not going to be spot on. That is to be expected. So budget Kershaws are a great way to go here. But again, don't expect too much. This isn't going to be in the category of amazing performance, and your blade's definitely going to go dull really fast. But if this is all you can spend, then it's definitely better than the last category. So again, stay away from the theme stuff. And two brands that I would really say stay away from are Tac Force and Frost Cutlery. Stay away from those. We'll probably do a video talking about one of those knives at some point, but those are some bottom of the barrel knives. So avoid those two brands. The next category, which in my opinion is the first interesting category, and unfortunately I don't have a knife on the table to represent it, so it's actually going to be represented by a Victorinox, my Victorinox Cadet, and you're just going to have to imagine the entire Victorinox line here, because it, for the most part, does fit in this category. This is actually about a $30 knife, but the price range we're going to be representing here is about $35 to $80, or the better beater category. These are generally not made in the USA. But some knives more towards the $80 point might be. These are going to be mid-range folding knives, not what I would call premium materials by any stretch of the imagination. But there are still some pretty good knives. So there shouldn't be any blade play, especially more towards the $80 mark. But if there is, it's not really a big deal. Blades will likely still not be centered, but if you get that, that's great. The best steels to watch out for in this range are still going to be medium quality at best. And by that I mean edge retention, toughness, and corrosion resistance. What you want to be looking for are steels like 8CR13 MOV, AUS-8, or the same thing being 8CR14 MOV, or at least very similar. Better yet, VG10 or D2. For the handle scales, FRN I think is fine. Fiberglass reinforced nylon is what that stands for. G10 in steel, if you can find it, or especially the higher grade 6061 T6 aluminum, which we'll talk about here. Those are all fine materials for your handle scales. For lock types, I would stick with the tried and true classic liner locks, frame locks, spine or back locks. Those are all great. The best examples that I can give would be, definitely the Victorinox line. These are excellent everyday carry items for small carry knives. Now, unfortunately, I do not have an Ontario Rat in D2, but let me tell you, for $40, a liner lock with D2 steel that's designed properly, that is a great knife. So check out the Ontario Rat 2. Hopefully, I'll be showing one on my channel soon, so I can actually, have some validity in what I'm saying. The Steel Will Cut Jack is another one that I have not handled. So Steel Will Cut Jack in D2, also for around $40. The standard Kershaw Blur, not this one, but the standard one that comes with, I don't know if it's CTS BD1 steel. Those are excellent knives, and they run about $60 to $70. And then Spyderco kind of starts to take over the higher end here, more towards $80. Your Spyderco Delica 4 or Endura 4 in VG10 steel for around $75 each are also great choices. There's still a lot of junk knives in this category, so watch out for that. Stay away from switchblades and side opening switchblades, OTF, stuff like that in this price range. They really won't be made well. And stay away from the fantasy stuff, because that's still present in this price range. The next price range we're going to move up to, and I'm going to be representing it with multiple knives, is $80 to $150, which is what I would call the first level of premium cutlery. These knives should be made in the United States. We're going to show the Kershaw Blur. This is an American-made Kershaw Blur in CPM S30V steel, and it represents right at about the $80, $85 mark, the start of this category, and it's an excellent knife. They should be made in the USA, at least with very high standards of quality control wherever it's made. There should not be any blade play at all. The blades sometimes aren't perfectly centered, though this Blur actually is. So you're more likely to see that in this category. It's not a big deal though, so as long as it doesn't rub, that's where you want to be. But you can generally adjust the centering yourself in this field because the tolerances are a little bit better. So we'll do a video on that at some point. You're going to be looking for a better balance of steel here, or more premium steel. You want a better balance of edge retention, toughness, and corrosion resistance in your steel here versus the previous range. Steels I would recommend would be 154 CM, CPM 154, which is actually a better, or the Crucible Powder Metallurgy version. I think I said virgin. Of the previous 154 CM. S30V and S35VN are also incredible steels. That's what's on this Blur here and what's on my Manix, the S30V. However, some exotic steels like M390 can actually be found here more towards the $150 range. I'm going to reference the upgraded Steel Will Cut Jack with G10 and M390. That's probably one of the most budget M390 blades I've ever heard of. Those are actually made in Italy and are supposedly really great knives. If you're unfamiliar with any of the steels that I'm going over, I would recommend a phone application called Knife Steel Compositions. It is on Android. I'm not sure if it's on Apple, but you can use that application and type in any of the steels I've mentioned and learn about their compositions to help decide if that's right for you. I'm going to list all the steels that I've mentioned in the description with their respective price ranges so that you can go through and kind of learn about those things if you want to. For handle scales in this price range, you're looking for G10 with steel liners, 6061 T6 aluminum, which is what you're looking at here. You might find titanium. It's going to be pretty unlikely. If you can find it, then that's great. But that's what I would suggest. I think FRN or fiberglass reinforced nylon is still acceptable if you value lightweight, but I don't like it. But definitely stay away from rubber and wood. Those belong in the previous price range. I know some people like rubber and wood, but over time they don't do well in heat and cold, and they kind of flake apart or fall apart. They expand and contract. And if you're going to be using this, and if you want an all-purpose folding knife, focus. It's not going to do it. Then wood and rubber are not the way to go. Knives that I would recommend for this category would be definitely the Kershaw Blur shown here in S30V, which is an upgraded model for about $80-85. The standard version of the Benchmade Griptilian, and unfortunately all I have on the table is an upgraded Benchmade Griptilian. But the standard version of this, which does not come with these handle scales, has 154 cm and an FRN handle, and they run about $100, somewhere around there. So that's definitely a good option. Has the axis lock, if you're unfamiliar with that. And then, of course, my current EDC, the Spyderco Manix 2. This one's in G10 and steel, and S30V steel for the actual blade. These run about $110 to $130 for the G10 models, $130 if you want the DLC coating shown here. And then also what's great, what I'd recommend for the Spyderco line is definitely the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, which unfortunately I don't have here to show. I know that's kind of blasphemy, being a knife guy not owning that, but those going to run in S30V steel and G10 about $135, or the Spyderco Native 5 with G10 and S35V and steel is what I'd recommend for about $145. So those are all fantastic knives for this price range. These are all going to be long-lasting quality folding knives. So opinions are going to vary widely, but that's always going to be the case, especially as we go up in price. Take into consideration the best locking mechanism, handle scales, blade steel, blade thickness, and blade shape for you. A thicker blade and edge generally equivalent to a tougher edge, but you'll usually sacrifice some slicing ability, meaning the knife might handle harder used tasks without chipping, but it may not glide through material the same way a thinner edge would. Reference point, this Spyderco Manix 2. Definitely a thin edge and glides through material really quickly, but if it had a thick blade stock, then the edge would generally be thicker, so it's not going to slice as well if that were the case. So thick doesn't necessarily mean better for everyone. You'll see varying blade thicknesses a little more often in this price range. Steel also makes a big difference in edge retention, toughness, and corrosion resistance depending on what you go for thickness and shape. Lots of great things to choose from. Definitely still watch out for gimmicky locking systems. Stick with the proven ones again, liner lock. You're going to find some titanium frame locks. Spine lock, lock back, Spyderco's compression lock that you see in the Paramilitary 2, and the bearing lock that you're seeing right here. Those are great. And, I haven't... also the Benchmade Axis lock is also great for this price range. I haven't handled many cold steel knives, but they apparently do make some decent stuff in this price range, so maybe take a look at those too. There are some automatic knives in this price range that are okay. I would stick with ProTech. If you really want a nice automatic knife, honestly, in my experience, that's really where I would suggest people be. But, look around. Think about the things I've said there. The next price range, next category up, $150 to $250. We're making bigger jumps here. There's a reason for it. Just bear with me. Again, these should mostly be USA made or made with very high standards of quality control. We are going to, again, reference the Benchmade Griptilian, even though it doesn't, this particular one does not, belong in this category because it's actually more expensive than $250 with these aftermarket scales. But you're just going to have to imagine it's the standard 20 CV and G10 model. I'll go over that. But the quality it should be similar to the previous category, but with more premium materials. Fit and finish should be very good. You should not have any blade play, and you should have nearly perfect centering. Now, I centered this one myself. It actually did not come centered, but it should. And it's, case in point, you can adjust these and center them. The reason you want that is so that the blade doesn't rub and dick itself up over time. So that is important. Exotic steels like M390, CPM 20CV like that's shown here, and CTS 204P are a lot more common in this price range, though they're all actually the same steel, so all great. More exotic steels like S90V, S110V, ZDP 189, even some Maximit out there now, CPM M4, CPM Crewwear, etc. All steels that you should look up and learn about for yourself. These are all going to be available in this price range for the most part. So look those up if you're curious, because they're all meant for fairly different things and have varying levels of edge retention, corrosion, resistance, and toughness. Carbon fiber and titanium is a great choice in this category. Let's actually use the zero tolerance. This is the basic version of the zero tolerance with G10 titanium frame lock and LMAX steel, which is another steel to take a look at. So that's a great one there. The upgraded version of this does come with carbon fiber and CPM 20CV steel, while still being a titanium frame lock. So, check that one out too. But let's see here. Where was I at? Carbon fiber is pretty tough and definitely more premium than something like 6061 T6 aluminum or G10 with steel. But those are still great too. I mean, they're still totally justifiable in this price range. So don't wave those off. Definitely, they're very durable materials. If you're looking for a flipper knife like this, look for bearings, and then look for lock bar inserts, which is this screw right here, and over travel stops, which is this disc right here. If you're going, especially if you're going for a titanium frame lock, these are great for keeping the knife deploying quickly as well as maintaining the life of your titanium lock bar. If you have a steel lock bar insert here, it'll actually help the titanium lock bar last longer when it's constantly engaging with that tang. So definitely look for that screw there. Lots of different grinds and finishes. Again, choose the right blade and steel for the type of work you're planning on putting it through. Some great examples here are the Benchmade mini or large Griptilian, Axis Lock in G10 and CPM 20CV steel. So the base version of the 20CV Griptilian. Those are going to run anywhere from about $165 to $180. Then, of course, you have the option to add aftermarket scales like this one. The Benchmade 940 Axis Lock in G10 and S30V steel for $170, not shown here, or the aluminum version of that exact same knife in S30V steel for about $180. The ZT 0562 frame lock, which we showed here a second ago, in the standard being in G10 and titanium and LMAX steel for about $200, or the upgraded 0562 carbon fiber frame lock in carbon fiber, titanium, and CPM 20CV for $240, which is a very, very good knife. That's very recommended, even though it's on the high end of this category. There's tons of other great stuff out there if you don't like any of the examples that I've shown here. So again, your choices are definitely not limited to the things that I've been talking about. We're going to leave the ZT actually out on the table because I've got to talk about that with the hinderer there. These knives should last your whole life, but mileage is going to vary from user to user. Titanium frame locks are a great choice for longevity, in my opinion. Just use experience and knowledge from your previous knife or knives to help you decide what is right for you. Okay, so the final price range here, and definitely the most controversial. So keep in mind that when I talk about this, the $250 to $500 price range, which is the end here, this is heavily opinion-based. I'm going to try to not make anybody angry. I'm going to go over reasons that some people justify the higher prices and what you're actually paying for. But again, this is my opinion. I don't want to make anybody mad. You can either agree with me or disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. My word is not law here. I just want to share what I know. So there's actually 3 categories here with foggy lines. High-end premium production, super high-end premium production like the ZT 0392 line, the factory customs, and then possibly even mid-tech can all fall reasonably in this price range. I'm actually going to link I'm gonna provide a link to the mid-tech term and what it actually means and who invented it. There's an interesting discussion on Blade Forums where Ken Onion actually posts that he invented the term and what it actually means. So if you want to go, hear from the guy who actually invented the term and what it actually refers to, then click on that link and go read about it. It's interesting. The $250 mark is no specifically definitive starting cost line in terms of quality. It's just a good place to start because production quality and cost of production kind of starts to get foggy here in terms of what you're really paying for. Most of these knives in this category closer to the $250 mark are still all machine made. Like some of the more expensive knives from the previous category, they might have parts made elsewhere to keep costs down. But they'll still be made with super premium materials and very tight tolerances, meaning they're put together very well. Hence the high-end production classification, which is foggy in and of itself. This is the Lion Steel TRE, which stands for 3 Rapid Exchange. It comes with 3 different means of deployment that are interchangeable, and then it's a full titanium with some excellent milling on the scales, and it also of course comes with your steel lock bar insert bearings. This is also M390 steel there, you can see made in Italy, so this is an excellent example, and it runs about $275. I'm not sure honestly if the TRAs are inspected by hand, but I'm guessing not. They're still made extremely well for $275. Knives that are closer to the $500 range are generally inspected and tuned by hand. And most, if not all, of the parts are generally made in-house versus being made somewhere else with potentially less quality control, which is then reflected in the price. Jeez Louise. Which is then reflected in the price that you pay. So it costs more to produce and check a knife this way, but it can be hard for some people to justify an added cost of $200, or in this case, this is actually outside of the parameters here, but it's just, I have the titanium scale on this. So this knife is actually $625, or the standard Hinderer with the G10 scale runs $425. But it can be hard for some people to justify an added cost of $200 plus for hand-tuned, all in-house made knives, regardless of the size or thickness, which, by the way, does not always directly correspond to added cost, even though you generally do see more substantially built knives in the upper part of this range. So, for comparison here, the reason the XM costs more has nothing to do with the fact that it's monstrous, because these are both titanium frame locks, both in M390 steel. And, they're in terms of what they're made out of, they're the same, but this is bigger, and that doesn't mean, that's not why this is more expensive, is what I'm saying. That's a totally different, the reason for that is completely different between the two knives. Anyways, if you don't believe me, go look at the ZT0920. It's actually way bigger than the TRE, and it's also full sculpted titanium with bearings and a lock bar insert, and it's CPM 20 CV steel, which is the same as M390, and it only runs $240. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better deal. They're just two different knives designed for different purposes. The 0920 is more for harder use cutting tasks, and the TRE is more for lighter tasks. The TRE also has, a few extra means of deployment, like I was talking about earlier, these interchangeable deployment parts. But I think the example is still pretty solid there. So, I don't know. Here's the best example that I can come up with. Let's use, people are going to go, oh boy, here we go, because this has been talked about many, many times online. Let's use these two here. Take the 0562 for $200 to $240 versus the ZT0392 series in full titanium. You should Google that if you haven't seen it. Those run around $400, or they did. Or the standard Hinderer XM18 with G10 scales and titanium for anywhere from $425 to $500, depending on what, you get a DLC coating or a fatty or whatever. These are all very functionally comparable knives, and they're all designed by Hinderer. But they're all put together with more or less cost-efficient methods. For example, on one hand, the 0562 is an excellent functional design, and even though it's designed by Hinderer, it is mass machine produced by ZT, and while the overall build quality is very good, it's noticeably less premium than a true Hinderer and has thinner dimensions, which again helps some people justify the cost of a real Hinderer. Side note, the reality there is with the blade thickness is that the thinner slicer grind of the 0562 actually makes it a better slicer, while the thicker frame, blade, stock, and cutting edge of the real Hinderer probably makes it a tougher knife that's more suited for hard use, even though the blade steel can be exactly the same on these two, 20 CV and M390 in this case. This is LMAX, but the upgraded one's 20 CV. So that's a choice you have to make for yourself based on past experience while cutting whatever you usually cut and your budget. But back on track, the ZT Factory Custom 0392 Hinderer designs are built almost exactly the same way as a true Hinderer, except that they come with full titanium scales on both sides. That's standard. They're nearly identical dimensionally, but the ZT costs slightly less, which seems to all boil down to it having a ZT logo on it versus the Hinderer horsehead. So they're designed by Hinderer. They have Hinderer's official hardware, which is made in-house by Hinderer, but the knife is actually produced by ZT, and for that reason, I assume, costs slightly less in total. That's frustrating to some people because the Hinderer XM18s are ironically also mass-produced and more readily available now than the 0392 line. Now that the 0392 line is no longer in production. Sadly, that's too bad because they're some of my favorite knives ever. And some people might argue that the 0392 is actually better because it runs on bearings versus the XM18's Teflon washers. There's nothing wrong with Teflon washers. It's just that's another argument out there. Some people prefer bearings. Some people prefer Teflon washers. Some people prefer phosphor bronze washers. That's up to you. And the 0392 also comes with full titanium scales standard. This XM runs, like I said, only $425 standard with the G10 scale, and the Thai scale adds another $200. So $625 versus the $400 you pay for the ZT version, and it's arguably the same thing or even better. So this type of thing between these three knives that I'm talking about here causes a lot of arguments over whether or not these prices are justified. So does higher price for added quality control, all in-house parts, hand assembly, and tuning directly correlate to a more premium, longer-lasting product? Maybe, but that's really for you, the buyer, to decide and what kind of budget you're working with. So back when I was all learning this, I kept getting different explanations for what was best, heavy quotes. So I ended up buying all three over time, which really isn't a good financial plan, and I'd like to help prevent other people from making the same mistake. In any case, both the aesthetics of the knife and whether or not you value that hand inspection, hand finished, and all in-house parts stuff is ultimately going to dictate whether or not you decide to fork over the extra money for those types of knives. Just keep in mind that you should definitely be expecting better fit and finish for that type of money. Ultimately, it really should be perceived as functionally perfect by your standards, not anybody else's, stuff you read online, forums, or YouTube videos like this one. It shouldn't be me or anybody else like me telling you what you should buy. It should be by your standards. And for that reason, if you have the opportunity, you should handle the knife before you buy it so you know what to expect. This type of purchase should not be made blindly online. Shouldn't be made purely for aesthetics, even though I've done that. Or as your first premium knife. This is a category you should graduate into, and your purchase should be based on experience with a knife from a less expensive category. As far as the overall fit and finish in this range, things to expect are perfectly centered blades, great action, no blade play, and the liners or seams should all meet up perfectly. You shouldn't have a G10 scale hanging over the titanium liner even the tiniest little bit. There shouldn't be gaps around the frame screws or pivot where they fit in the G10 or titanium. They should always have a premium steel. But let me be clear about this. Which steel is up to you? In this price range, they're all going to be excellent steels. There's no best steel when it comes to the higher end and exotic stuff. It's all better than entry level stuff or even the mid-range stuff like AUS-8 or VG10. But what you use it for should help you decide what steel you want on your knife. And not every steel is going to be available in every knife, so you got to choose wisely. These knives should last you your whole life and possibly longer, so buy what you like. But my vote, honestly, is for a titanium frame lock if you're aiming near 500. That to me is where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck in terms of overall function, use, theory of use, blah, blah, blah. On that note, there's a lot of unnecessarily overbuilt titanium frame locks in this range. And again, thicker does not always mean better. But an overbuilt titanium frame lock is generally a knife that is seen as justified by people like me looking to spend this kind of money, as it is viewed as more capable in terms of a folding knife. But don't be fooled and go for something way overbuilt like a 1/4 inch stock. This is a .165 stock. Let me tell you, that's plenty thick. That is plenty thick because this thing's already not a great slicer, but it's built substantially enough that I trust it. And it still cuts well enough. Don't buy something crazy over thick, 1/4 inch stock, crazy thick titanium scales unless you really think you need a folding hatchet. But at that point, why not just, use a hatchet? So again, make sure you choose the right size, blade, shape, grind, edge geometry, and steel that's right for you. Stay away from anodizing unless especially if it seems like it's adding unnecessary cost. It really, anodized colors don't really add any functional purpose on titanium, though Type 3 hard coat anodizing adds some durability and protection for aluminum, 6061 T6 aluminum, and there's still many great knives in this price range that are made from 6061 T6. So just remember, no knife is indestructible. Proper maintenance is always a must. Oiling, things like that, cleaning your knife out. My favorite knives that I've ever owned in this price range, definitely the Lion Steel TRE shown here. Where do you want to go? How about right there? Probably going to be blurry. Definitely the Lion Steel TRE. It's not a hard use knife, but it's made incredibly well, and you're going to be hard pressed to find something just like it with all the same, lock bar insert, bearings, M390 steel, full titanium with the sculpted frame and the rounded spine and blah 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 for $275 is great. The ZT0392 Hinderer series, if you can find one, oh my God, those are so awesome. You are going to pay a premium on the secondary market right now. But in my opinion, those are crazy good knives. Crazy, crazy good knives. You can still get them less than a full titanium Hinderer, and they are excellent. The Les George Talos and VECP Mid-Tex. Wow, definitely. You can find those on the secondary market for as low as $350 right now, though some of them will go as high as $450, maybe $500 if they're a rare variant. Excellent, excellent, excellent knives. Of course, the Hinderer XM18, both the 3.5 standard stock thickness and 3.5 fatty. Those are both my grails. The fatty is just with a thicker blade stock, a .185 or .187 stock, just like the XM24, but it's in the same length. It's the same size as this in terms of length. It's just thicker and has the heavier standoffs that you see on the XM24. So definitely recommendations there. I've also handled the Chris Reeve Umnumzon. Excellent knife. I would definitely recommend that. It seems like the new ZT0393 would be a really good buy, seeing as it's built very similarly to the 0562 and 0392 knives. And then also the other Chris Reeve knives. You can't really go wrong on those two. But those are just my recommendations based on the knives I've handled and that I actually like. For anybody wondering about why I'm not talking about the XM24 is because the XM24 hasn't, just like the XM18, it hasn't really been around long enough for anyone to say it's definitely a functionally better folding knife for the money, and those are $600 standard, and it's just a longer XM18 3.5 fatty. It's literally the fatty, but a little bit longer. We're talking a 4-inch blade versus a 3.5-inch blade, and the frame's a little bit longer. So it's excluded because I can't say that there's no way to say that it's actually worth that much better. And the reason for the $500 cutoff, in my opinion, most if not all knives I've ever seen over 500-ish have some form of non-functional embellishment or gimmick that's part of the cost, which arguably you could say about any of the knives on the table, but this is just my opinion. Or they just cost way too much for how much use you could, in my opinion, realistically get out of them. So tons and tons and tons of different opinions out there. Ultimately, it's best to make your own choice. Now, you might be one of those guys who says, well, money's not an issue to me, so then what should I buy? So if you can justify it financially and it's outside my suggested price ranges, then buy it. Honestly, that's what I think. you're going to end up buying what you really want anyway, regardless of what anybody says. So it's best to just buy what you want right off the bat and love it, or it'll end up costing you more in knives you buy as a placeholder for the knife you really want. This guy. That's what happened to me. So trust me, I'm living proof of that, and the knife world is full of people just like me. Just, definitely learn from my mistakes. That's the best thing I can tell you. I'm not going to talk about customs. Those are substantially more expensive, and they don't quite fit what I'm trying to accomplish with this video today. So if you've got the money and you really want a custom, go for it. But I'm not going to talk about customs. That's pretty much it today, guys. I really wanted to do this. I wanted to have a video that was a point of reference for what I suggested in different price ranges and what to expect. And I'm really glad I did this. This is my third attempt on this video. I keep messing it up. But I finally got it all out. I'm really sorry if I talk too fast. I'll try to link those things in the description. If you enjoyed the video today, or if this was helpful information for you, or if you actually made it all the way through this 37-minute video, then please leave a like, because it makes my day and it helps me know that people are listening and that they care, and this is just fun to do. So also, if you'd like to check out some of those other videos I was referencing where I talk about more in depth about inexpensive or expensive knives that I either do or don't like, then check those out. And if you enjoy those videos and this video, then subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications button, because there is definitely more to come. Thanks, and have a great day.